You're listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and Jon Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.
Hi, Jon. How are you?
I'm good, Charles. And how are you?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. Not bad.
Good.
So today, I think, Jon, that we are going to dispense with our customary introductory chat with each other because the guest on our program today is you. And I know that I certainly have a lot of questions for you, and I'm sure that you have lots of great stories that our listeners will want to hear. So if it's okay with you, I think we'll just jump straight into the interview.
That sounds fine to me. Thanks, Charles.
By way of a brief introduction, for those of you who don't know who Jon is, in 2005, Jon set up a website called mammalwatching.com, which is in fact the site that hosts this podcast. And Jon also runs a North American mammal watching group on Facebook, as well as a nascent YouTube channel, also about mammal watching, of course. And Jon is well known in the mammal watching community as being the person who has seen more mammal species than anyone else in the world. Now, Jon, I think it's fair to say that you have been at the hub of the mammal watching community for the past 15 years or so, but you're actually a late bloomer to mammal watching. Can you tell us a little bit about how you became a mammal watcher and what sort of influences you had?
Yeah, I mean, I was a late bloomer in taking it seriously, but I think like so many of us, it started when I was very, very young. So some of my earliest memories as a kid were a stuffed wild boar head in a hotel in France that I was just fascinated by. And I must have been about 3, crying my eyes out in the back of the car in Scotland with my parents while they were looking at red deer and I couldn't spot them. I was absolutely that's something that's continued through life, actually, that kind of feeling. And another very, very early memory is my father, and this was a regular thing, lifting me up over the railings and putting my head inside the outstretched jaws of a hippopotamus while I was screaming. Now, this was a stuffed hippo, I hasten to add, but it was still terrifying for a 3-year-old.
These were railings where?
Railings in, I think, Exeter Natural History Museum. I remember railings. Okay. It was probably a piece of string to stop people touching it. But anyway, it was a very big deal to my little self. And I also had a toy zoo that was my pride and joy. And I found a letter I'd written to Father Christmas, which is classic because it just lists the animals I wanted for my zoo. That was really all that was in this letter. And the thing is, the mammals on the list were the same mammals that are still on my sort of top 20 encounters. There's gorilla, there's a carpy. So all of these things at a very early age, you could see it coming. Was it Socrates who said, give me the child until he's 7 and I will show you the man? But then, yeah, for sure, when I was a teenager, all this disappeared. And then after I left university, I moved to Zambia for a year. And that was within a week, I was on my first game drive. And this was a total epiphany. All the David Attenborough stuff as a kid came flooding back. It felt like I was seeing in color for the first time on that game drive. I'd never felt anything like it. This was love at first sight. Wow. The violins were playing, the birds were spinning around my head singing, and the thunder was clapping. And that I think was really where it began in earnest.
That's interesting because both for me and Cheryl, who we interviewed previously, Africa was the place where we also became mammal watchers. There is really something about that continent, isn't there?
There really is. There's nowhere like it. It's spectacular, and everyone who's been there, I think, will understand and agree with that.
Yeah. Jon, what was the moment that you realized that you had become a mammal watcher? Because you flirted with becoming a bird watcher at one point, didn't you?
When I was in Zambia, I started a list, of course, because I love my lists. I started a list of mammals I'd seen, but I was interested in everything, reptiles, even birds. And at the end of that year, I was actually offered a job as a guide in a fancy safari camp in the Lower Zambezi, which I was desperate to take. But my parents insisted I come home and get a proper job. So I reluctantly did that, got back to the UK, and it just crushed me. It was so grey and crowded, and it was, you know, everything that Africa isn't. So I thought, well, I've got to keep this connection with the bush. What can I do to recreate the safaris of Zambia? So I thought, well, maybe I'll go bird watching. That seems a popular thing. So I rocked up at the local RSPB reserve in Essex, and it was probably a cold day in February or January. And you know, it was the seventh circle of hell. There were crowds of people wandering around, mainly these kind of middle-aged men with bad raincoats on, talking into cassette recorders. Pigeon, two blackbirds, seagull. And I just thought, I'm not going to get my nature connection this way. This isn't going to work. So then what can I do to at least be on my own and do something a bit different? Because I do like to be different. So I thought, I know, let me focus on the mammals, because no one seems to be doing that. So that was when I self-identified as a mammal watcher. I think the moment I realized that this was more than just a hobby or an interest, and would be, I would say, a passion, others might say obsession, was the day I heard there was a southern elephant seal in Geelong, near Melbourne in Australia. I was in Canberra, and I got in the car and I drove 1,673 kilometers, I think it was, in one day to spend an hour on the beach with the seal. It was well worth it, but literally 5 a.m. in the car, drove all the way, possibly stopped for a pee in McDonald's, saw the seal, took pictures, drove straight home again. And that was when I began to think, okay, maybe this isn't totally normal. Well, maybe other people wouldn't see this as totally normal.
Yes, fair enough. So what drove you to set up the mammal watching website?
It was, you know, the love of wildlife then that led me to move to Australia. And I started taking it pretty seriously there. But it was as I was about to leave Australia, I'd spent 7 years, you know, touring that country, traveling as much as I could, trying to see as many mammals. I saw 250 different species in that time. But all the information I'd got was either trawled from birdwatching reports, where there was often an addendum at the end with mammals, and they might mention 2 or 3 species, or by talking to professional mammalogists, to researchers and scientists, volunteering to help grad students with projects. So I'd got a lot of information that wasn't available anywhere else. And I thought, well, you know, I'm probably the world's only mammal watcher, but I should put this out there in case someone else like me comes along, because wouldn't it be helpful to have this kind of information that the birders had? So that's when I started the website, really to share that information that I'd gathered in 7 years in Australia.
And how do you see websites like yours and the internet in general as having affected the way that we watch mammals?
I think probably two big reasons. The first is, you know, when I set this up, I really thought I was the only mammal watcher, or one of 2 or 3 other guys I knew in Australia who were doing it as well, but they were birders at heart. But people, you know, you got in touch with me fairly on, Charles. People started getting in touch saying, wow, I've always been interested in mammals. This is great to have this resource. So there was a community began to grow. And once there's a community, you know, you feel like you've got some friends, and it makes it more fun. So that there was that kind of community spirit around it. But of course, the big thing is information, because you know, there is so much information about birds, with where to find bird guides for so many countries, so many trip reports. And mammal, it's very, very hard when you used to try to plan a trip and there was no information about it. Like, I wanted to see a snow leopard. Of course, desperate to see a snow leopard in the early 2000s. And I met an Australian guy who'd done his PhD on them in Nepal, and he'd been there 3 years and he hadn't seen one. So there was just no information about how to find them, where to go, when to go. None of that was there. But once, you know, information starts appearing from others, it begins to snowball. And all of a sudden, yeah, there are places now to see snow leopards. There are places to see so many species that just 15 years ago were a crazy pipe dream. And so that's really changed, I think, that amount of information. It's growing very, very fast. Every year, we're getting places to see some of these things that I thought I would never see when I started.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. prior to the internet, basically the only people who could tell you where to go and find some of these rare species were academics or little groups of people who typically kept the information to themselves. And I remember trying to find a site to see Spanish lynx outside of Cotolenana, which was really hard to get into. And it took me years and basically following a trail of friend of a friend of a friend before I heard about Andújar and in the Sierra Morenas, where you could actually go and see them. And now someone just needs to go onto your website and you can type in Spanish lynx and out will come Andújar. It will tell you where exactly in Andújar you can go, which are the best viewing spots, where to stay, best time of the year. All of those things are now out there. So it really, I think that really has changed the face of how we watch mammals, hasn't it?
No, I mean, it certainly has. It's a lot easier. I mean, there are of course people who don't want to share information, sometimes for very good reason. They're very worried about a species. If they put it where it is, it may get hunted or too many people. So I'm very cautious of sharing any information that isn't mine. If someone's shared something with me in confidence, I won't share it back. But almost anything I see, I want to put it out there to help people see it, because for me, the threats that most mammals are facing are not from the pressures of mammal watching tourists going to bother them. It's habitat loss. It's all the other things we know about, and encouraging people to go and see them. With the lynx, there's a whole economy now around that, the lynx in Andújar, and that's, I'm sure, contributes quite a lot to why they're being protected and they're doing so well. Is because there's money in it for local people.
Yeah.
So the more I can do for that, I think that's a service that everyone who contributes to a report is doing.
Yeah, I agree. As you said earlier, this is something that's just snowballing. More and more people are doing it. More and more money is going into it. And for the most part, that can probably only be a good thing. So, John, you have seen close to 2,000 species of mammal at last count. I know this is going to be really unfair, but I'm going to ask you to pick out a few of your favorites of those 1,900 plus mammal species. I know that you mentioned on the introductory chat that you saw an aardvark on your 40th birthday, which was obviously a major sighting for you. Yeah. But tell us about some of your other best sightings and what it is about those particular sightings that make them so special for you.
Yeah, I mean, this is, of course, a question that I'm often asked and I've thought about a lot. I mean, in some ways, they're all special, well, nearly all of them. And it's a bit like asking me to choose my favorite child. Of course, I have one, but I'm not going to say which one is. No, I think probably the ones that are most memorable, that really gave me the biggest thrill, of seeing things that I didn't think I was going to see, seeing big, sort of mega charismatic species that there were no reports for. It's that journey into the unknown when you visit somewhere that very few other people have gone mammal watching in, and you actually see something spectacular. They're the most exciting, because it's like, whoa, this was a big surprise. It's a fantastic thing to see, but also we can tell other people about this. This is awesome. We've got something really nice to share. So when you and I saw that pygmy hippo in Sierra Leone, that was a moment exactly like that, because we went there, no mammal watchers had seen one there. We knew we were there, and we got lucky. Seeing giant pangolins in Gabon, it's a species I did not expect to see there. We actually saw two in 2 weeks. Again, another mega mammal that was just fabulous.
Yes, you did invite me on that trip, John, and I turned you down to go to Central African Republic. And it's all right. It's only taken 5 years and several $1,000s of therapy sessions for me to get over it, but I'm almost there.
Yeah, that was unfortunate, Charles. I wish you had come. I think one of the first things I thought after seeing it was, oh shit, Charles is not going to be happy. I'm sorry.
I will forgive you one day, John.
I felt guilty. But if I had to pick just one, I would say it was my trip to China in 2005 to look for giant pandas. That was perhaps the most remarkable in a number of ways, and I can tell you a little bit more about why that was the case. So I'm leaving Australia in late 2005, and I have to go over to Europe for a new job. And of course, I'll have to stop in Asia somewhere. So why don't I add in a week's mammal watching en route? So I thought, I'd really like to see a giant panda. So, looking on the internet, there's nothing. Talked to a couple of bird guides in Australia who've led a lot of trips through China. And the advice is you've got no chance. No one's ever seen one. It's not possible. It's all closed to Westerners where they are, and they're very rare. Anyway, then I stumbled on a fledgling project that was WWF funded, I believe, an eco lodge in the Qinling Mountains in the middle of China. And it was called wildgiantpanda.com. And they were offering to run these trips for people like me to go and look for a panda. So I didn't know anything about this outfit, didn't know what to expect, but, thought, well, why not give it a shot? So a few weeks later, I was packing to leave, and I get an email from them literally the day before I'm getting on the plane saying, looking forward to meeting you, Mr. Jon. Some news, don't be alarmed, but there was a landslide and the road into the reserve is closed. So you have to walk 25 Ks to get in there now, but it's no problem. We'll have horses for your bags. Oh no, this doesn't bode well. So get there and the horses are there, and we walk in. It's a beautiful walk. The camp itself was probably one of the most basic places I've ever stayed. There was no toilet, no shower, nothing. But the guides, the two guides I was introduced to, they were two still of the most extraordinary trackers I've ever encountered. So the basic deal was there. We'd walk into the forest every day with those two. They spoke no English. The only word we had in common was panda. There was an interpreter who was sent along with me as part of the package. I actually think she might have been working for the Chinese government to keep an eye on me, is my guess, because she spoke perfect English, but she was completely hopeless in the forest. And it was very clear early on that Mr. Zhang and Mr. Hay didn't want her around. And I think it was early on we flushed a wild boar and she screamed, and that was it. She didn't come out again with us. So I think everyone was pleased that she was staying in camp. And the deal was we just walk into this, fairly dense forest, following little creeks. There were no trails, and they would walk for 45 minutes, and it's very up and down. They'd find a little rise or a little hilltop. We'd sit down for 10 minutes and have a cup of hot water from the thermos, and they just listen. And I didn't hear anything, but they'd point in a direction, and off we'd head. And 20 minutes later, the first morning, golden snub-nosed monkeys, that beautiful, ridiculously colorful and strange looking monkey. And on the first day we had, a couple of Himalayan goral on cliffs, which are that weird deer, antelope, goat cross, strange looking things. Lots of panda poo everywhere, big green lumps of bamboo flavored, I suppose, dung. Lots of cyanid pandas, but no pandas. So second day, same deal, went out all day with these guys. We found golden takin, which another extraordinary animal. That's like an Asian muskox. They're in the goat family, but they look like a Highland cow crossed with a moose. And actually, I was reading about these the other day. The golden takin, the subspecies that's there in the Qinling Mountains, is thought to have been the legend of the golden fleece that Jason and the Argonauts went after. So that's what I read on Wikipedia. So it must be true. So we saw, lots of really cool mammals, every day, just brilliantly found by these two trackers. No pandas. And on the third day, it looked like the weather was going to start changing. So I was getting nervous because I think I only had 5 days there. And on the third day, this was Panda Day. We made a big effort. So by the afternoon on the third day, we were very close to pandas, very fresh sign. And then the guys heard one, and it's like, panda. And there was something moving through the bamboo, probably no more than 10 meters in, but dense. We couldn't see it. So we crawled along on our hands and knees for, I'd say, an hour, picking little twigs and sticks out of the way so we made no sound, just following this animal as it was leisurely moving through the bamboo, hoping to get a glimpse, but nothing. It didn't show itself. It was just dawdling along, eating. So the guys then hatched a plan, and I somehow understood exactly what they were planning to do, even though obviously we couldn't communicate. So one of them was going to stay with the panda, and me and I think Mr. Hay went down to a clearing down the hill. And I think the plan was that that Mr. Zhang would flush the panda out, and it would come down the hill, and we'd see it in its clearing. So we're there, and we take different sides of the clearing to keep a lookout, not knowing where it'll come out. And of course, it comes out right by Mr. Hayes' feet. So he's got a little point and shoot camera, and he gets this kind of close that he could have had a selfie with his camera. And I'm charging over there to get it. He's beckoning me like this, and I don't know whether it's fast or slow or quiet, but I just sprint in the end. I've got to see this thing. So I got like 3 seconds of this panda looking at me, moving away and turning around, looking over its shoulder at me. And that is still as fresh in my mind today as it was in 2005. And I remember waking up the next morning, and it's like one of those, when something really good's happened and you wake up and you don't really think about it. And then like a minute later it's, holy moly, I saw a panda. No one's going to believe this. This is so cool.
Warm glow, isn't
absolutely.
it?
Yeah.
It's, you think I can die happy.
Yeah.
Wow. What a sighting that is. And because it's such a stunning creature as well, isn't it?
It's stunning. It's the WWF emblem.
Right.
It's so many. It's everyone knows a panda, and it's so rare, and it's so for so many reasons. But also the experience of being in the bush with these two guys was just extraordinary. They were just mammal whisperers. They could find these things, and I've never met anyone quite like them.
Right. And what's interesting about that is the chase is part of the whole thing. If you had bumped into a panda within 5 minutes of being there, it probably just wouldn't have had the same effect.
I'd have felt cheated. Yeah, absolutely. Right. It would cheapen the whole experience. Yeah.
It's that fact that it was difficult and it was tough, and you had to go on your hands and knees, and all of that just adds up to the experience that when you do finally see it, it's just something. It's like a religious experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, John, with your mammal watching, you keep a list of mammals that you want to see, isn't it? Is it your top 10 or 20 species?
Top 21, in fact. Yeah.
Oh, it's top 21.
I don't know why. I think I probably couldn't decide when I tried to go for 20. I had one left over. So it's top 21. Yeah.
So as you see them, you will then sort of move those off the list, and then you add some new ones. So what criteria do you use to add new ones to your list?
It's a mixture probably of charisma, rarity, general weirdness, and difficulty to see, mystique. Something I've looked for and failed to see, of which there are many, that often then gives them an edge up the ladder to the top 21. Anything with giant or pygmy in it is usually something pretty cool. Giant pangolin, giant armadillo, pygmy hippo. Or something that's unusual and unique, like an aardvark, something there's nothing else quite like it. They're in a group of their own. And some things are just really cool, like the markhor, the fantastic goat from the mountains of Central Asia, which I think has the longest horns of any antelope or any animal probably, but that's spiral horn thing, just things like that, spectacular. I have a sort of basic goal every year to see 50, but it's both quality and quantity. So I have this top 21 to see list that's always there bubbling away, and I will try and pick trips that target some of those.
So on your current list of 21, what would you say are your top 3 most wanted?
For sure, a carpy. As you know, we've talked about this many times, is number one. Number 2 would have to be bush dog, small canine from Central and South America. They're just so cool. They have little packs of them trotting through the forest, but very, very hard to see because they're perpetual wanderers. So people see them from time to time, but there's no spot for those yet.
Right.
Number 3,
of chihuahuas, aren't they? They sort of
they
go walking around together.
They're not very fierce.
They seem to run everywhere, don't they? Yes.
Yeah, they do. They're always trotting. They're like puppies out off the leash. And number 3, I don't know. Maybe at the moment, maybe that one floats. But tufted ground squirrel right now is definitely up there. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
Right. You mentioned markhor. Now let me take you back to that one, because I remember you telling me some crazy story about you going to great lengths to see this species. Can you remind me of that?
Yeah, this not one of my most sensible choices, perhaps, but of course, markhor was on the list, so I was going to do anything I could to see one. And in 2011, I got the chance to go and do some work in Pakistan. I was working for a development agency there, so I'm going to Pakistan. Fantastic. I could go and look for a markhor at the weekend, right? But of course, the security situation, at least then in Islamabad, was fairly serious. and no one from our organization in France had ever been to Pakistan. So my mate, who's the head of security there, he's a former commander in the French police, a really good guy, calls me up because he has to give clearance for me to go. And he's like, John, I know you and your mammals, but this is very serious. You must promise not to go and look for any crazy mammals in Pakistan. You must stay in Islamabad. You must not leave the hotel. You promise? Yeah, Andre, I do. I definitely promise. I was probably at the same time on Facebook connecting with a friend of a friend who ran an agency in the Hindu Kush, and he was like a solid guy. I think he's the first Pakistani ever to climb Mount Everest. So, someone you think you could trust. Going, how can I go and see a marker? I know they're around Chitral up there in the Hindu Kush, but is it safe? What do we do? And I can't remember, I mean, he said it was safe and it was fine. I think someone else told me at the time, go, but don't stay more than 48 hours. If you can go there for the weekend, you're good. But longer than that, there's a decent chance the Taliban are going to discover you. So it needs to be short and sweet. So, right, that's my weekend sorted. Okay. So the plan was I would fly from Islamabad to Chitral. But the planes, I was warned, often 50% of them had cancelled because of the weather. And of course, on Saturday morning, the plane was cancelled. I'm at the airport. But the guys, the tour agency I was using had another plan, and we drove up to a town I think called Deer in a small car with this crazy driver who was so fast. And then there I was met in a 4-wheel drive by the two guides that had actually helped the BBC with their snow leopard documentary. Some of the first footage of snow leopards was from up there. And they drove me then. We went through some of these ridiculous roads where just cracks cut out the cliff. We went through a tunnel that hadn't been finished, that was being built by the Korean Development Agency, that was partially flooded. And it was only open for an hour a day for people desperate not to go over the mountains. So a difficult trip. Got there and people were delighted that I was there. I was maybe the first tourist they'd seen in years because of the Taliban. I was assigned a soldier with a gun who slept outside my hotel room. So it was all a big adventure. Very security conscious. And on the first day we go out to look for these marker, and we're driving through some of those remote valleys, and the wheel dropped off the car. The drive shaft broke on the car. It just clonked. So I'm in the middle of nowhere, standing outside the car, waiting for another vehicle to arrive with my camera and my binoculars, sticking out like a sore thumb. So anyway, nothing happened. It was all good. We saw the marker that afternoon. Fantastic. They climbed trees. All these things halfway up a tree, just weird things. And of course, beautiful animals. That was really great. But the twist and I got back, then the flight was cancelled again on Sunday. So I had to drive back to Islamabad, but got home, all good. And then a few days later, I'm reading the newspaper. I think it was like literally a week later, and bin Laden had just been caught, just been killed in Pakistan. I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. So I look at where he was and I look at the map, and I think I probably was within about 20 miles of where he was at one point on the way up, because he was just north of Islamabad. And the thing was, I was in the car driving around there, and I was so excited to be on the road in Pakistan. I was texting all my friends going, ooh, I think I just saw bin Laden. Look, I'm sending pictures. And if Homeland Security weren't listening into my chatter, I don't know. So that was... I'm glad I got back in one piece from that one, but I have seen a marker.
John, you do realize that this is about mammal watching, not about James Bloody Bond.
I tell you, it would be Mr. Bean or Inspector Clouseau most of the time in my case, not James Bond.
Yeah, just hold on a second there. John, you need to write something down. Cancel all travel plans with Jon Hall.
Oh, Charles, no.
Right.
I'm a changed man. I've changed. Sensible only now.
Yeah, right. So, okay, we've talked a lot about travel, and obviously you travel a phenomenal amount. You also have a family. And this is something that mammal watchers struggle with. It's like, there's only a certain amount of time in the day, in the year. And how did you meld your mammal watching hobby with your family life?
I mean, the first, probably the most truthful answer is I didn't. The second one would be brute force. I have an ex-wife who you could probably talk to about this more than me to get a more accurate answer. But with my kids, I've taken a lot of trips with them, and they have. I think they've enjoyed some of them. My son has probably enjoyed all of them. My daughter, not so much. Katie, I think, to begin with, when they're young, they've always traveled, so they're great travelers. But increasingly, Katie especially finds it boring now to go and look for animals. Partly, I think there's a typical sort of sibling dynamics there, where if her brother's really into it, she can't be. Just siblings can't agree on things like that. But one thing I've learned now that they're old enough to have an opinion and actually to sort of strike back when I'm trying to force these bat and rat catching twitch fests on them as trips, is something that is actually your advice, Charles. I don't know if you remember, but you said you'd found with your girls that while they might not be into the sort of listing trips, they did like the quest for a certain species. And one of the best trips, I think I was following your advice on this, I ever had with my kids was in 2014, and they were supposed to be coming here to New York to visit for the holidays, but Katie broke her arm, and I had to travel to see her. And so I thought, well, I'm going to be in Europe for like 10 days. What on earth am I going to do? And I just can't comprehend holidays that don't involve mammals. My brain just sort of freezes up and I short circuit. I don't even know where to start. So I'm like, oh, I don't know, what can we do? We have to do something. And someone had just reported I got like a piece of news information or a clipping or something saying there was a Mediterranean monk seal in Croatia. One of Europe's rarest mammals. There's only a few hundred of these seals left. And it's something I looked for in Turkey and didn't see. So I thought, let's drive to Croatia from France. Maybe we can find this monk seal. And so we had this wonderful road trip where we drove through Italy and got to Croatia, and I didn't even know where to begin. So I started talking to people, and what I discovered was the Croatians are some of the friendliest people on the planet. And everywhere I went, they were kind of fascinated that we were after this thing, and they were calling neighbors, and it was like this treasure hunt, like from one lead to another. And on the penultimate day, we got to the right areas, the Istrian Peninsula around Pula, and we knew the seal was around there, but no one quite knew where. And I was getting a bit forlorn, and we were driving around these sort of areas where maybe there'd be a seal, and we stopped at this bar on a cliff top, like a beach bar sort of by the ocean. And there was a sign about monk seals and a closed circuit TV pointing at this cave. So holy moly, this is where the seal, one of the caves it was using. And it wasn't there at the moment, even though I scrambled and was dives sort of looking over the ledge. But they knew the people who were working to protect the seal. And there was an NGO who were basically following the seal around. And every time there was a report of it hauled out on a beach somewhere, they'd swoop in with cones to try and keep people away. And so the next morning, like 7 a.m., like the phone rings, and the seal is on this beach here, and we're driving to see it. And I remember then Katie, who's like the biggest mammal watching skeptic at times, she was in the backseat of the car jumping up and down. Come on, we got to get faster, Daddy, faster. We have to get there. And we got there and we saw it and took pictures, and it was just fantastic. So the quest works, I've learned. I don't try and inflict too much on them, not on Katie at least anymore. Though Patrick, he's a different story. He loves being in the jungle, though I'm ashamed to say he's more into invertebrates and bugs than mammals. So can't have everything, but
right. Yeah, the thing about kids is that they can get used to pretty much everything or anything. Our girls were probably about 8 before they realized that most families didn't actually spend every single holiday looking for mammals, right? that this was actually rather unusual, but that's a fairly good long time frame to work with. 8 years. Hopefully you can keep them
maybe we should
keep
start
them in the dark.
We should start a cult and move to a remote area of Oregon, and we can all raise our kids in blissful ignorance. That might be the way to do it.
So what's next, John? What are your next really big mammal targets?
Well, like everyone, it's been a bit tricky the past year to plan too much without getting disappointed. 2 trips I'm really looking forward to that I hope I will be able to do in the next 12 months is the Horn of Africa, which you and I have talked about, and we'll hopefully go together to see things like dibber-tag, a naked mole rat perhaps, and an African wild ass, which is It's just something about seeing a real, genuine wild ass in Africa that really excites me. And the other one is New Guinea, West Papua in New Guinea, where a friend of, he's a bird watcher who's rapidly coming over to the mammal side. A very, very good bird watcher. He's a bird guide, but he's really got into his mammals. And we're planning a trip there as soon as we can. And there's, a decent chance of 2 different tree kangaroos, long-beaked echidna, the spiny anteater, but the big one, which I don't know anyone who's ever reported that. There's a really, really good chance for these. He reckons we could get 50 mammals, all of which will probably be new in 2 weeks. And for me, this is probably the last major ecozone I haven't been to. And so it'll be my last chance of that sort of trip where everything we see is new, and they are the best trips.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, that all sounds fantastic. Fingers crossed on the whole Horn of Africa trip. Of course, Ethiopia has been having a few issues at the moment, but let's hope that all clears up.
I hope so too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. We live in hope.
We always do.
Well, Jon, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic, and I look forward to catching up with you on the next episode.
A real pleasure, Charles. Thank you. It's always good to chat. See you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and Jon Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com.